ancient wisdom is more relevant than ever today as we search for sustainable solutions to feed a growing global population while protecting our planet.
Imagine you're a farmer. You've spent decades spraying chemicals, buying expensive fertilizers, and watching your profits shrink year after year. Then someone suggests you release thousands of ducks into your carefully cultivated rice fields. No barriers, no supervision, just chaos with wings. You'd think they were insane, right? Yet that's exactly what happened across southern China, and what came next shocked everyone. From skeptical neighbors to agricultural scientists studying the phenomenon from half a world away. The footage went viral almost immediately. Thousands upon thousands of ducks moving like a living carpet across flooded rice paddies, creating waves of motion that looked more like a nature documentary than modern farming. People filmed it from roadsides. The images sparked debates online. Was this a publicity stunt? An elaborate prank? Had these farmers lost their minds? But as the weeks turned into months, something extraordinary happened. The rice didn't die. It didn't get trampled into oblivion. Instead, it thrived in ways that defied conventional agricultural wisdom. The ducks weren't destroying the crops. They were protecting them, feeding them, and somehow making the entire system work better than chemicals ever had. 1 year later, the results are in, and they're causing agricultural experts worldwide to rethink everything they thought they knew about farming. Because what looked like madness turned out to be genius wrapped in feathers. Here's what nobody tells you about modern agriculture. It's trapped in an expensive, toxic cycle. Farmers spray pesticides that kill bugs, which leads to pesticide-resistant superbugs, which requires stronger pesticides, which cost more money and damages the soil further. They dump synthetic fertilizers that run off into rivers, creating dead zones in oceans. They spray herbicides that contaminate groundwater. And every year the costs climb while the soil quality degrades. It's a treadmill that never stops, and farmers can't get off without watching their yields collapse. Or so everyone thought. Rice duck farming isn't new. It's ancient, practiced across China for over 600 years before the chemical revolution swept it aside. Before synthetic pesticides existed, farmers already understood something profound. Ducks are natural farm workers. They patrol fields eating insects, their droppings fertilize soil, and they manage weeds without a single drop of herbicide. It was agriculture in harmony with nature, a biological partnership refined over centuries. But when the 20th century arrived with its promise of better living through chemistry, the ducks vanished from the fields almost overnight. Machines replaced animals, sprayers replaced birds. Traditional knowledge got dismissed as backward and inefficient. Then, in the early 2000s, something changed. Agricultural scientists in China, Japan, and Southeast Asia started asking uncomfortable questions. What if the old ways weren't primitive but actually superior? What if we traded sustainability for short-term convenience? Controlled studies began emerging with startling results. Rice fields with ducks required drastically less pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers while producing equal or even higher yields. The ducks weren't just nostalgia. They were cost-effective, productive, and potentially the answer to farming's biggest challenges. So farmers in Zhejiang, Fujian, and Guangdong began bringing ducks back, not as a quaint throwback, but as a serious strategy to make farming more resilient, profitable, and sustainable in the face of climate change, soil degradation, and skyrocketing production costs. What happened next exceeded every expectation. When those first ducks got released, most observers expected disaster. Rice plants are delicate, especially young seedlings. Thousands of birds trampling through fields sounded like agricultural suicide. But the ducks did something nobody anticipated. They ignored the rice almost completely. Instead, they went after exactly what farmers wanted eliminated: insects, weeds, and pests. It was like watching a targeted strike force that knew its mission instinctively. The ducks immediately began doing what chemicals usually handle, except better. They devoured plant hoppers, stem borers, and leaf hoppers, the insects that devastate rice crops. Their constant movement through the water disrupted mosquito larvae, reducing disease vectors without a single spray. Pests that had developed resistance to pesticides had no defense against being eaten. The result, rice grew with fewer disturbances, and farmers spent dramatically less on pest control. Problem number one, solved. Then came the weeds. Normally, rice paddies require regular herbicide applications to prevent weeds from choking out the crop. The ducks ate barnyard grass, duckweed, and red rice with enthusiasm. But here's where it gets clever. Their feet, constantly churning through the water and soil, disturbed weed development at the root level. They were essentially providing natural tilling, preventing weed seeds from establishing themselves. That churning had another unexpected benefit. It improved oxygen flow in the water, reduced soil compaction, and encouraged deeper root growth in the rice plants. The ducks were accidentally optimizing growing conditions just by doing what ducks do. And then there's the fertilizer situation. Ducks produce nitrogen-rich droppings constantly as they move through the fields. In conventional rice farms, nitrogen gets added through synthetic fertilizers, often excessively, causing runoff that pollutes waterways and creates algae blooms that kill aquatic life. But in rice duck systems, the waste became a perfectly calibrated natural nutrient source. The organic matter-enriched soil fed rice plants and eliminated the need for repeated chemical applications. The ducks were providing multiple services simultaneously: pest control, weed management, soil aeration, and fertilization, all while reducing costs and saving farmers enormous amounts of time. Of course, this wasn't random chaos. Timing mattered critically. Ducks were introduced about 2 to 3 weeks after rice transplanting, once seedlings were strong enough to handle some movement. They stayed in fields for several weeks or months depending on climate and region, carefully managed to prevent overgrazing and sometimes removed during critical flowering stages. This wasn't luck. It was precision agriculture using biology instead of chemistry. After one full growing season, the numbers started rolling in, and they stunned everyone. Across multiple regions in southern China, farmers reported yield increases ranging from 7% in some trials to as high as 18% in others, depending on soil quality and duck-to-acre ratios. A peer-reviewed study published in 2020 confirmed what farmers were seeing. Rice duck systems weren't just competitive with chemical agriculture, they were outperforming it. Pesticide use dropped to near zero in many fields. Herbicide applications were eliminated entirely in some areas. Fertilizer costs plummeted since duck droppings replaced synthetic nitrogen. But farmers weren't just saving money on inputs, they were gaining entirely new revenue streams. The ducks themselves, fattened on a natural diet of insects and aquatic plants, sold for premium prices as meat. Duck eggs provided another income source, and the rice itself could be marketed as duck rice or eco rice, fetching 10 to 20% higher prices per kilogram because it was genuinely chemical-free, backed by practice rather than just marketing. The environmental impact was equally dramatic. Water quality improved as chemical runoff disappeared. Beneficial insects returned to fields that had been ecological dead zones. Farmers noticed lower methane emissions. Rice paddies are significant methane sources, but the duck system somehow reduced that output. Researchers from Chinese agricultural universities and international experts began studying the phenomenon intensely, confirming that rice duck systems didn't just reduce inputs, they increased ecological resilience. But something else was happening, something farmers didn't expect. The ducks weren't just improving rice production, they were reviving entire ecosystems that had been dying slowly for decades. Years of chemical agriculture had taken a silent toll. Beneficial insects disappeared, frogs and birds became scarce, water turned murky and stagnant. Biological life was draining away. After ducks returned, biodiversity exploded. Dragonflies, frogs, spiders, and small fish came back. Pollinating insects returned. Birds like herons and egrets reappeared. The constant duck movement prevented algae buildup and increased oxygen circulation, creating cleaner water that supported not just rice, but entire aquatic food webs. Rice duck farming wasn't merely sustainable, it was regenerative, actively restoring balance instead of just minimizing damage. Fields that had functioned like isolated factories began acting like living ecosystems again, connected webs where everything supported everything else. The ducks were the thread pulling it all back together. The land literally came back to life. The model didn't stay in China. Vietnam and Thailand began testing rice duck systems in flood-prone regions where ducks provided both yield improvements and income insurance during unpredictable weather. Bangladesh, supported by the FAO, trained smallholder farmers to integrate ducks into their fields with similar success. Madagascar and Nigeria showed interest in adapting the model to African rice paddies. The most compelling long-term success story comes from Takao Furuno's farm in Fukuoka Prefecture, Japan, where the Aigamo method has operated since the 1980s. Furuno's 3-hectare farm routinely matches or exceeds chemical-based yields while eliminating most pesticides and fertilizers. His duck rice brand commands 20 to 30% premiums in Japanese markets. His ducklings provide meat and eggs, diversifying income. The Aigamo model has since spread to over 75,000 farms across Asia and beyond, proving that ecological practices, when refined, can thrive in the modern era. Of course, challenges exist. Ducks require careful monitoring and protection from predators. Timing must be precise. Water levels need stability. Not every farmer has training in balancing animal and crop management. Market access for premium eco rice isn't universal. It's not a magic solution that works everywhere effortlessly. But here's what makes this story remarkable. In a world racing toward automation, high-tech solutions, and ever more sophisticated chemicals, one of agriculture's most effective breakthroughs came not from a laboratory but from remembering what worked for 600 years before we forgot. Rice duck farming proves that cooperating with natural processes can be both productive and sustainable. Those farmers didn't remake agriculture, they remembered it. And those ducks didn't just waddle into rice fields, they walked into the future.
But for many farmers, the benefits far outweigh these efforts.